There are silences more absolute than the void between stars. In the beginning, before the hymn of the Astronomicon wove direction across the deep, before the emperor's gate shook stone, there was only that silence, ancient, patient, and hungry. In this silence, secrets gestate, awaiting the moment when ignorance frays and memory returns like a wound that will not close. Beneath terror's blackest stone, entwined with the molten iron of lost epics, a tomb breathes. It is locked not by metal or by code, but by absence, a memory erased so fully that the very dust recoils from it. Here, in the cathedral spaces beneath the imperial palace, legends say the forbidden truth sleeps. Yet the emperor built not only with genecraft, but with fear. The throne's shadow is vast, but it cannot erase its own source. You may walk the reliquary halls, hear 1,000 sermons, but you will not find the 2nd or the 11th. Between those lacquered banners and monumental reliefs, an absence howls, more sacred for its erasure than 1,000 victories. On a night that was never recorded, the stars of a terror flickered once, crimson and gold, like the closing of a god's eyes. In that moment, the fate of empires turned. People of lesser mind, scribes, janitors, even some among the lowly tech priests, shuffled through these stories in terror, their lips sealed, their records redacted. It is easier to worship the things you are ordered to forget. But for those who serve behind the golden mask, who kneel where incense drowns all but sorrow, the echoes remain. Sometimes, as the candles gutter and the shadows crawl up marble columns, a custodian will look to the darkness between the plinths as if expecting the missing siblings to emerge, armored in accusation.
There are legends old enough to haunt the warp itself, moments where Genesis churned beneath the obsidian vaults of Terra, and marble twisted beneath hands not yet stained by sorrow. Before the Imperium was a cage, it was a promise built on blood, on questions whispered in the watchful dark. The Emperor, shaper of fate and breaker of chains, walked alone among the machines of Mars, his mind ablaze with an agony too vast for flesh, too infinite for stars. He needed weapons, but not merely blades to crack bone or vessels to shatter worlds. He needed sons. Thus began the gene seed ritual, alchemy born of sorrow, ambition, and an understanding of creation no mortal dared repeat. The divine mechanisms spun in silent sanctums, while the machine priests trembled in awe and terror, swearing never to record these rites. In the cryptic language of their binary prayers, they encoded the unspeakable. Let what emerges carry the memory of gods. 12 children, each a fragment of divine intent, each a prism whose light could heal or ruin empires, emerged from the crucible. Their birth was not baptism, but war declared against entropy itself. Their souls had no history, their forms purer than myth. The night of the first ascension, thunder walked with the emperor. In laboratories drowned in oil and incense, rituals unraveled the human genome, weaving strands until destiny itself screamed. The Omnissiah's voice, for one breath, fused with mortal imperative. Stewards of Mars wept as sigils was carved into living tissue, fate impressed upon flesh. The 2nd and the 11th, those whom history would murder in silence, were different. Rumors among the oldest servitors recall that their gene seed burned brighter, their essence drenched in cosmic dread. The custodians mark this as divine error, but the architects of that night called it inevitability. Some say the emperor cursed the world with his desperation. Some say he loved the darkness too much to let it die. From the manufactorum depths, 12 cradles shimmered, each pulsating with forbidden vitae. The Adeptus Mechanicus kept watch but dared not intervene. They knew what transpired was not science, but sorcery, a truth woven from the sinews of lost gods. The birth of these Primarchs echoed like the tolling of the galaxy's last bell. Their cries shaped the psychic winds, their silence shuddered the warp. All terror reeled as the Emperor's secret coruscated through the planet's bones. But the birth of the Forbidden Legion carried a price. The labors of creation tore the fabric between worlds, the doors of possibility swung open, and the raw furies of the warp, a hatred without name, crawled through. Within these first moments, fate poisoned them. Ancient witnesses, doomed to madness by proximity, depicted two of the cradles as hungering voids. They recorded, no light survived their birth, and hope withered on their lips. Even among the techno-mystics who carved the sacred equations, dread was palpable. The black-hooded figures monitoring the process scribbled ritual apologies, as if begging the universe to swallow their error. The Emperor, peerless and grim, pressed onward. In his gaze, these suns must serve as pillars of rebirth. The 2nd and the 11th, revered for their terrifying purity, became sigils of what must never be spoken. Power born in silence lies closest to betrayal. From the rumor-haunted hives to the orbital sanctums of Luna, the tale spread like spectral fire. Those who remembered the first nights of the Primarchs echoed the phrase only in prayer. The Emperor built gods. He paid with what only gods could lose. In war-torn shadows, as storms bled over the manufactorums, the Emperor's hand wrought the unthinkable. The gene forges churned, processes concealed beneath rites too sacred to utter. Tech priests murmured, divinity demands sacrifice, and watched as 12 destinies were stitched from agony and hope. The origin of the Forbidden Legion is not a tale the Imperium will ever confess. The echoes of lost suns resound instead in architectural omissions, the missing banners, the blank mosaics above the thrones. Machine logic suppresses anomaly, but the human heart recalls absence. Inside the sanctum, the Primarchs dreamt. Their first visions were not of conquest, but of loss. Ghosts pressed against the glass, stars bleeding into the void. The Emperor visited them in the hours unrecounted, whispering prophecy into blood and bone. You will be the edge of my empire. You will be memory incarnate, truth, even if the galaxy must forget you. Among the Mechanicus, awe curdled into terror. They saw in the 2nd and 11th a purity alien to even their sacred machines. The fabric of reality buckled. Destiny, once their blueprint, became their warning. No empire survives its own genesis unscathed. The birth of the Forbidden Legion was an act of transgression, a challenge cast to the gods yawning beyond the Imperium. For their creation came not from want, but from dread, a hidden vow that even the Emperor feared to break. In the psychic ether, the future recoiled. Oracles from Titan wept blood, muttering visions of suns devoured by their own names. The black ships, receiving the echo of their birth, sailed thicker darkness than ever before. The Legion's first hours, never sung, never recorded, were laden with agony and splendor. Their touch warped steel, their memory twisted destiny. Upon the slab of creation, the Emperor's voice rang. The galaxy will know you as saviors or shadows. It will not choose. Each birth screamed a warning into the fabric of fate. Yet as the Primarchs grew, their minds sharpened by opposition, their souls bruised by ambition, the Emperor observed in two sons a flaw refined into miracle. They questioned, they remembered, they suffered. These qualities,
cradled through allegation and heresy alike, danced on the edge of prophecy. In obsidian crypts, artisans painted the moments of Genesis, 12 forms each crowned with veils of flame. The second and 11th, always shaded and unfinished, were rendered as sanctified scars. To paint absence is to confront mortality, but for these lost sons, absence became prophecy given form. Their training began as ritual, a war within, a test against entropy itself. The emperor led them, not as father, but as judge. From the shadowed alcoves, tech scribes recorded gibberish, unable to understand, but compelled to witness. The birth of the Forbidden Legion was not a triumph, but a wound, a silenced rebellion against the gods of cause and consequence. The emperor, bound by motivations unrevealed, shaped destiny with hands that shook heaven and hell in equal measure. In the silence of their birth, the galaxy quaked. Fate, having witnessed the origin of these sons, wrote a prophecy on the bones of creation. When the forbidden gods rise, empire itself must fall or fade. When the ritual ended and the emperor retreated into shadow, the second and 11th lay awake in the dark, their first memory not of triumph, but of expectation. The story of their origin was already being erased.
In the hour before betrayal became prophecy, the galaxy saw an ascent so staggering that even the heavens dared not speak. Where once there was silence, a blankness consuming, a space between legends, the Forbidden Legion strode forth as gods who refused their own forgetting. They remade worlds with hands of thunder and minds cut sharper than the warp winds that howled at their births. Their rise was not merely a campaign of war, but a new law. The melody of order sung through teeth gritted in defiance. They became myth's engine. To those who heard only the echoes, they were the emperor's right hands, an unseen blade. But to themselves, they were more. The unburied question, the unfinished verse, the promise that order could be more than merely survival. Imperial armies, jaded by eons of blood and the repetition of faith, paused as the forbidden banners unfurled, their sigils half lit and half effaced. Wind struck shadows against the parchment sky. The second and 11th did not march as the others did. Where sons of Dorn built fortresses and sons of Guilliman wrote codes, these legionaries reimagined empire with every breath. They wove dominion as the old Norse skalds once did, line by iron line, conquest by whispered fate. On the black sand of the perdition reach, 1,000 wastelands knew resurrection. The second, ever the architect, rose citadels from the bones of failed colonies. They minted law, bred order, and settled judgment with hands both cruel and just. It was said their eyes saw the potential in ruin, and that even despair bloomed if pressed beneath their yoke. The 11th moved stranger, ghosts in the skein of the Imperium. Their approach was not hammer, but song, not overture, but undercurrent. They vanished into the spines of dying stars, emerging as saviors or executioners in times of deepest night. Where fear reigned, they left silence. Where hope flickered, they drew forth conviction from the marrow of memory. There is assent in the wound, just as there is prophecy in the pain. It was in the crucible of Kanar that their legend sharpened. Reports swirled with contradiction. Some say the second wrought miracles of genetic clarity, turning broken men into paragons in the time it takes stars to flicker out. Others tell that the 11th spun a tapestry so intricate that dead worlds awoke for one shining, doomed moment, only to collapse all the more beautifully when abandoned. Among the conquerors of the Age of Unification, none worked with such fevered purpose. Whole sectors fell without blade drawn. Enemies saw their undoing inscribed in midnight, as if fate itself was being rewritten, not by decree, but by revelation's own hand.
But every gain demanded a cost. The Mechanicum wept at the efficiency of compliance, fearing that to make the galaxy too perfect was to tempt the pride of the gods. The Librarius, uncertain and divided, debated whether the source behind this new order was genius or lunacy. On Luna's forge rings, even orbital defenses blinked in wary respect as the forbidden grew from rumor into reality. They had no need to shout their victories. Every world subdued by them trembled for centuries after, worshiping in silence the absence they left behind. Within the Legion itself, unity danced on a blade's edge, equal parts ruthless harmony and private heresy. The Second Sons did not suffer dissent, but engineered it out, replacing doubt with clarity and emotion with arithmetic justice. Even among the Primarchs, whispers stirred on how these brothers made war on disorder, first in the world, then in the soul. By contrast, the 11th spun chaos into art. Their tactics bent expectation and spun myth from what should have been disaster. In silence, they wove the warp's music into every move, balancing mercy and ruination, often in the same breath. To fight beside or against them was to question reality itself. The Emperor visited then, sometimes in gold, sometimes in shadow. His judgment was quiet, his orders absolute. He saw in these sons the apex of his design, and the flaw that defined it. He did not say love. He said only victory. They gave him what he demanded, even as the cost devoured them within. A legion rising too swiftly captures the attention of gods and of those whose power depends on not being rivaled. Imperial historians, those permitted to remember, describe this age as radiant, grim with the possibility that empire alone could master entropy. Yet the songs of soldiers and the psalms of conquered priests all whisper something darker. In their presence, the universe felt thinner, the boundary between creation and correction too frail to hold. On Sable's end, the greatest of their triumphs, the second stood on parapets of bone and steel, watching civilizations reorder themselves with the precision of divine engines. The 11th, unseen but everywhere, whispered into the hearts of dissenters and kings alike, reshaping not just epics, but the very grammar of destiny. In the void between victories, the forbidden were most sublime. They dreamed not only of winning, but of remaking the empire without the tragedy that had birthed it. In these moments, the seeds of their undoing sprouted unnoticed. Rumor became ritual, that the emperor's vision, if realized by their hand, would not just preserve humanity, but perfect it. That ascent for the forbidden was not about dominion, but redemption. To ascend is to cast a shadow even the sun cannot erase. Yet as they climbed, they left behind those who could not follow, brothers who grew weary, mortals who felt only the cold of being rebuilt into perfection's coffin. The seeds of resentment germinated in silence, sprouted in forgotten hearts, and blossomed in the echoing halls of power only when it was too late to pluck them free. The ascent of legend always brings its inverse. Even as the banners of the Forbidden Legion streamed through black wind and starlight, the warp's hunger brightened. They did what none dared. They challenged the story itself, shaping empire as legend, rebellion as sacrament. There are moments lost to all but the warp and sighing relics. In these, the 2nd and 11th met, not as twins, not even as rivals, but as the last keepers of a truth too dangerous for remembrance. One wished for a world perfected by sacrifice. The other yearned for an order built on imagination, not decree. The emperor saw both, and for a heartbeat, even he hesitated. The stars mark their ascent not by light, but by the shadow that expands behind it. In the end, history records only that the greatest order ever wrought carried the seed of its own annihilation.
Once the birth chambers rang with hope, the measured cadence of alloyed hearts, and the gold-lit prayers of men who believed themselves untainted. But all things created in defiance of darkness must one day be tested by it. This was prophecy given shape, promise turned poison. The Emperor's 12 sons, pillars meant to hold the galaxy aloft, stood on the edge of becoming more than myth, less than memory. Yet of all these sons, 2 bore the weight of flaw so deeply woven that even the Emperor could not name it. Their sorrow was prophecy's mirror, their will sharper than the blade of fate itself. The others watched, uneasy, as the 2nd and 11th grew apart, steps haunted by absence, thoughts churning with the gravity of knowing too much. On distant worlds, their legions rose swiftest. The tides of compliance followed in their stride. Suns snuffed for disloyalty, civilizations broken, then swiftly rebuilt with most unholy order. To the Mechanicus, they were marvels. To the Inquisition, omens. To the legionaries, gods wrapped in contradiction. The galaxy, loath to admit a fracture among perfection, thus spun myths instead of truths. Where the forbidden legions walked, records warped and data crystals failed, as if machine and destiny both bent to their collective shadow. The light began to rot. Whispers slithered through the halls of power. A scribe found hanging in a data vault, eyes burned black. An astropath lost in the screams of a vision he could not utter, hands etched in blood with untranslatable sigils. Mars crackled with unrest. The Adeptus custodes, sworn to remain heedless, began to tighten their circle. Not all secrets rot in darkness. Some burned too brightly and consumed the world around them. The 2nd, marked by a brilliance that veered to cruelty, grew dissatisfied with mere conquest. The 11th, haunted by visions of what was yet to come, grew cold, then wild, then silent. On the edge of the known, their legions forged a pact beneath midnight suns. If the Emperor's dream is made of sacrifice, whose blood is the mortar? They began to question, at first in whispers, then with fire. Entire populations vanished, their compliance not denied, but made taboo. On these worlds, the very air screamed with psychic residue, as if the planet itself mourned a crime unspeakable. The Istvan system remembered. Long before its own fall, the warp trembled around forgotten moons. Shipmasters recorded imaging errors, angles that bent back upon themselves, echoes of voices never born. Some claimed to see 2 mighty figures, one wreathed in embers, the other drowned in the void, quarreling over a world that would not be tamed. Back on Terra, paranoia fermented. Malcador's silencers stalked the darker wings of the Imperial Palace, erasing records with a fury both mechanical and desperate. They must not remember, he wrote in a tome that burned itself upon completion. The Emperor, too, began to withdraw, his visits to the Forbidden Sons tinged with frost and silence. He offered neither condemnation nor comfort, only a gaze faltering beneath the weight of his own creation. The wound that cannot close is the one inflicted by your father's silence. The 2nd Legion rebelled, not with grand gesture, but with a perfection that defied human frailty. They made their recruits into mirrors, stripping fear, love, and even memory until only obedience survived. Whole gene lines went missing. Some whispered it was not corruption, but a quest for incorruptibility so severe it snapped the soul's spine. The 11th was subtler. Their fall was not a plunge, but a wash. Drip by dripping, doubt eating away at purpose. Their visions intensified. Stars falling from orbit, burning books, a throne wreathed in screams. Their warriors became less an army, more an ecstatic cult caught in the threads of their Primarch's unraveling mind. On the war world of perdition's coil, the first true fracture appeared. Mounted within a void fortress, the Forbidden Legions met in secret, their banners muted. A council that could have mended fate instead carved it to the bone, because what is divinity but a circle none can escape? There, an oath was broken, and with it, the galaxy's spine. It was not simple heresy. It was not even treason. It was the revelation that the dream was never theirs, that they were not brothers, but warden and prisoner, error and aftermath. What the Emperor built, the cosmos would reclaim. The Primarchs of the Forbidden, knowing themselves damned by design, chose oblivion over loyalty. At the first sign of rupture, the warp rejoiced. Demons licked at the seams of the material world. Echoes of the primordial truth drifted into the waking mind of psychers across the Imperium. Where once came peace, now only plague. Entire fleets lost in silence, the void alive with the gnashing of things no lexicon could name. A legion that dies is mourned. A legion erased is a curse that never ends. The scouring began. Loyalist forces, notably the secret arms of the Custodes and the ebon blades of the Sisters of Silence, descended upon the forbidden legions in the black between worlds. Records are ash. Only fragments survive. They did not die quietly. The war of erasure raged not in the open, but in the liminal spaces of memory and faith. Forbidden worlds burned with silent pyres. Every monument toppled, every gene vault scoured clean with fire and oath. Tech priests enslaved to terror scrawled heretical litanies into reactor vaults before immolating themselves. On the battlefields, the sons of the Second Legion fought with an elegance so horrifying, their foes heralded it as beautiful damnation. The 11th embraced madness, their ranks dissolving into living nightmares, war chants hollow with knowledge of their own fated vanishing. The Emperor, at last, pronounced judgment. There was no trial, no accusation, only a decree, more final than oblivion. They would never have existed. And so the strangest war ever fought by the Imperium was not to kill, but to erase. Statues unmade by acid and time, gene seed burned in cathedral braziers, songs forbidden upon pain of extinction, legion by legion, memory collapsed backwards, until where the banners of 12 had once billowed, 10 alone remained. A god's lie is more enduring than any truth. In the psychic aftershocks, humanity found itself lessened, a wound that bled not blood, but potential. The few who remembered were unmade themselves, turned to ciphers, erased from even the comfort of regret. But the galaxy holds grief beneath its rituals. In the empty halls where two Primarchs were never enshrined, sometimes a curtain stirs and elders avert their gaze, hearing the echo of a footstep that history cannot bear. If in the dark of night you find yourself haunted by the sense that something vast was lost, that the cycle of betrayal runs deeper than any record, that is the gift of the Forbidden Legions. Even in oblivion, they teach us what lingers suffers more than what dies. No heroes end, only the silence of names left uncarved and worlds wiped clean, trembling on the edge of myth. Corruption not as crime, but as consequence too sacred for the living to remember.
Not all shadows fall by accident. Some are cast, with intent precise as a scalpel, a design so elaborate it eclipses the architect. The Emperor's greatest creation was not his sons, nor his empire, but the lie that kept them both alive. The truth about the Forbidden Legion was hidden for reason. Its shape, more monstrous, more divine than any war or decree. There is a room beneath the Imperial Palace, blacker than midnight, colder than the data vaults of Mars, where record fragments flicker, erased but never entirely gone. Here the sigillite argued with silence itself, his words thick with fear and love. On every wall is painted the outline of an answer. In every answer, a wound. It was never simple. 2 Primarchs, 2 legions, both erased for transgression. What was the crime? Some claim it was heresy, rebellion against imperial will, war upon brotherhood, the undoing of their gift. But the hidden truth, exhumed only by lunatics, ancient machines, and those damned by proximity, is more elusive,
more necessary. Beneath the Emperor's golden mask, there is terror, a terror not of failure, but of knowledge. The 2nd and 11th were born different, not because their gene seed was flawed, but because it was too pure. In their code, the Emperor wrote questions, not answers, an algorithm for perfect adaptation, creativity beyond control. They were made to test fate, not serve it. What is most forbidden is not the act, but the reason for its necessity. The truth. The Forbidden Legion was ordered to seek what the Emperor feared most, that which could outlive divinity, rewrite prophecy, burn even the warp's madness into shape. They were the experiment beneath the experiment, reality, inside out. Their ascent warped the galaxy itself. Stars blinked and moved, worlds shifted on unseen axes. Psychic storms erupted, their echoes spreading through the black ships. In the cryptic mind of the Imperium, events bled together. Systems compliant one year fell to chaos the next. Populations rewritten in their own histories, as if someone was rebooting order itself. On Sable's end, the 11th touched the warp not for conquest, but communion. They documented what no scribe dared, patterns in the madness, symmetries in the tumult, that spoke of will, not accident. The second sons, meanwhile, weaponized the genetic artifact within themselves, proposing a union of flesh and machine that frightened the Mechanicus and shamed even the Emperor. This is the heart of forbidden truth. The Emperor believed in control. The Forbidden Sons believed in transcendence. The chasm became insurmountable. Ever deeper, the Emperor conspired with the Sigillite and the Ordos Malleus to peddle reality, adjusting records, trimming memory, excising possibility, till only a single thread remained. Where two brothers once sought to expand what humanity could be, now only silence, terror, and the violent preservation of stasis cloaked the Imperium. The librarians who read nuclear prophecy within the gene codexes foresaw not only war, but evolution. The Forbidden Legions uncovered flaws in the Emperor's plan, weaknesses of the psyche, sorrows of immortality, seeds of chaos in divine reason. To them, damnation was a challenge to be solved, not cursed. On the mindscape of the warp, the truth assembled itself into a shape only the mad could see. Demons did not hate the Forbidden Legion. They envied them, as the warp covets novelty. The galaxy itself shuddered. The Emperor's ultimate fear was not corruption or destruction, but irrelevance. He saw that his legacy, so meticulously conceived, could become merely scaffolding for something his sons would one day build and forget to worship. The Inquisition cloaks all this in ash. Excommunication not for heresy, but for what could have been, they mutter, never recording, only erasing. Even Malkadar's own archives are sealed so tightly that time itself recoils from their locks. Memory is the crucible most empires refuse to face. Exactly how the Forbidden Legions fell, was it the Second's blend of logic and cruelty, the 11th's dance with the warp, or was it that both simply could not remain as subjects beneath a rule so afraid of its own children? History holds its breath. Every attempt to answer births only more questions. There are poems, contraband in most worlds, where the truth survives as metaphor. The stars were told to forget what light feels like. Occasionally, a tech priest will slip and recall the protocol sequence impossible for living machines, but perfectly mirrored in forbidden gene codexes. In the vaults of Fenris, wolves howl not simply for the lost, but for the promise hidden in absence, that what was erased may one day be remembered,
and that remembrance itself is outlawed by the gods. Occasionally, emperors of lesser worlds, flushed with victory, dream of recreating lost sons. These dreams end in plague, fire, or failing star. Reminders that the experiment, once tried, never forgives its echo. Yet the galaxy is not merely a graveyard. It is a library. Every erased name, another book, whose words cannot stop haunting the reader. The hidden chambers beneath Terra, those forbidden to all but the Emperor's oldest enemies, reveal only the mechanism of omission. Statues have no faces, tapestries no color, prayers are written but never spoken. This, finally, is the meaning. The greatest secret of the Forbidden Legion is the cost of knowledge, the price of letting creation become revision. The echo is louder than the origin. Some say the Forbidden Sons haunt the warp, not in agony or vengeance, but in memory, waiting for the moment prophecy will need their names again. The galaxy, tired and blind, suspects nothing, but in dreams, in omens, in ritual mistakes, the light of what was lost burns with a heat the living cannot bear. The Emperor's last conversation with the 2nd and 11th is never recorded, but the survivors remember the echo. Not every promise is meant to be kept. Not every son is meant to return home. In these lines, the darkness grows tangible. The secret is not in violence, but possibility. Not in horror, but longing. And so, the Imperium sits, poised on the edge between legend and confession. Some futures still tremble, resolved only if the forbidden can be named again. Until then, their memory is chained beneath earth and sky, their truth always hiding just beyond the howling end of history.
The silence after calamity is not quiet, it is marrow deep, a crimson resonance vibrating beneath the surface of all things. When the Emperor's decrees scattered the forbidden into myth, the Imperium did not mourn, they braced, clinging to ritual as the only shield against memory's venom. Yet the galaxy is built on aftermath and truth. Once released, never returns to its chains. Even as banners were burned and the names of the 2nd and 11th carved out of liturgies, the echo of their existence carved new fissures in the soul of empire. Across 1,000 worlds, the empty spaces left behind became altars to absence. On the thunder plains of Baal, initiates kneel before blank pedestals, chanting prayers to those who are not, and their eyes shine with terror and awe. Among tech priests, the phrase silica scrivener is a euphemism for ghosts in logic, fragments of code that rebel, legends of the machines haunted by lost Primarch dreams. On Terra, the grand statues overlooking the palace gardens still bear traces where chisels halted, hands shaken by prophecy. Marble dust filters through aqueducts, mingling with the oil of forbidden rituals. In these subtle places, the dead cannot be hidden. They bleed through stone and circuit alike. It was in the centuries after erasure that the Imperium became something altogether new. The loss of 2 legions, their brothers' silence, and the Emperor's refusal to admit the wound forged a culture where myth replaces memory and caution strangulates curiosity. The echo outlives the voice. The custodes drill in secret, their rites bracketed by gestures whose origins no manual records. At midnight, some slip spare golden coins into crevices beside the sanguine gate, a payment for silence, a currency to buy forgetfulness. Gene rites of Mars, pressed by nightmares they cannot name, sometimes engineer relics incapable of full function until they detect a genetic signature that no living soul carries. These artifacts blink in and out of activation as if awaiting command from ghosts. On the war moons of the Segmentum Tempestus, storm priests gather at dusk to recite half-remembered sagas, verses forbidden yet stubbornly persistent. Some weep, faces shrouded by vellum, claiming to hear distant Legion footsteps in their dreams. But the deepest legacy is unease, a collective intuition that somewhere the price of history is still being paid. The Inquisition, even now, assigns entire ordos to the surveillance of myth. They do not hunt rebels, they hunt remembrance itself, rendering suspect any who wonder about origins, any who count banners too carefully. Within the Black Library, strange tomes whisper new prophecy. First, there were 12, now there are 10. One day, only one. Prophets of the Adeptus Sorestaris claim to sense a ripple in Fury's veil each year as the star Annihilum blinks. They consult dust, shadow, and flame, predicting the return, not of glory, but of reckoning so old that even the gods cannot remember its cause. On the annals of the legionaries, both venerated and unspoken, the aftermath takes shape as a lesson, one taught in omission, lived in suspicion, inherited in fear. The few who carry the knowledge in secret do not speak, but shape worlds in their image, paranoid, watchful, always hungry for the next heresy that might reveal the shape of what was lost. The galaxy is restless. Echoes from the edge void bleed into psychic phenomena. Astropathic messages sometimes end with fragments of forgotten oaths. An Imperial Navy captain, dying on a lost freighter, inscribed his final log, "If you find this, remember, not all erasure is mercy." But if loss is a curse, it is also an invitation. The aftermath of the forbidden is a call, a hollow note in the choir of the Imperium, demanding that one day the silence might be broken. There is legacy in the error, as much as in the perfection. The Second Legion's methods live on in the calculation of stratagems and the icy justice of leaders afraid of uncertainty. The Elevant's wild adaptation haunts the dreams of librarians, librarius and non-librarius alike, who struggle to unravel psychic knots left by wars that will never be written. Sometimes, to inherit means to hide. New faiths rise in shadow. Mountaintop cults on distant worlds paint cryptic icons. Two veiled figures, locked in embrace or battle, forever unidentifiable. The Magos, who studies the warp's ebb, notes a recurring algorithm, a pattern never solved, a question the Emperor left for generations to bleed over, but never answer. Children born beneath eclipse moons sometimes murmur the numbers 2 and 11 in their sleep. Parents weep and pray, fearing visitations, or miracles, or curses. Adjudicators of the administratum encounter patterns in failure, records that decay more quickly where the forbidden once marched, planetary histories that fracture along the fault lines of their ancient compliance. If history instructs, then myth comforts, and the aftermath of the Forbidden Legion is both. For some, it is a warning. For others, a promise. For all, it is unfinished business. The Imperium's greatest fear is not rebellion, but recollection. That what was undone may one day return, unleashed by a galaxy too old for lies. In the warp, the after-echo flickers as residual prophecy. The storms burn differently along routes once patrolled by the forbidden. Even daemons hesitate in these corridors, whispering the old legionary tongue and voices made of static and grief. On board lost space hulks, Marines sometimes find gene sigils half erased, armor bearing marks no chap sight, but too late, for the memory travels with them, a specter of fate never exorcised. For every world rebuilt after erasure, there is a shadow in the census, a blank entry, a silence imprinted on bureaucracy and ritual alike. Even now, in the age of Imperium's decay, rogue psychomancers claim to sense two wandering archons in the tides of fate. Are they damned, ascended, or simply waiting? The galaxy holds its breath. Legacy is the wound that keeps bleeding. The Emperor himself is changed. His silence, sharper than laws, enforces continuity but breeds unrest. The Sigillites' archives remain sealed, not with locks, but with curses. To open these tomes is to invite fate back into history, to risk the only order holding a fracturing galaxy together. In the end, the aftermath is plight woven into law, caution entangled with prayer. Some believe the cycle will repeat, others that the wound is final.
All know in the bones of empire that every act of forgetting is a promise, one day to remember. And in this promise, legacy becomes prophecy. If ever two lost sons return, they will not bear the weight of forgiveness, but the fury of truth.
There is a truth the galaxy fears more than ruin, that every legend is an unfinished question, and every echo is a longing for what can never return. The erasure of the Forbidden Legion did not simply end in age. It forced the Imperium and all who believe in order to confront the shadow woven through every civilization, the cost of survival, the price of memory. In the catacombs beneath Terra, where forbidden relics flicker with ember light and starlight cannot reach, silence has become the final law. Here, ancient custodians kneel not in prayer, but penance. Their lips move with catechisms no living soul has sanctioned, begging forgiveness not just for what was done, but for what was unmade. 1,000 chapters have been written about the Emperor's vision. Each one ends in certainty, order, fidelity, iron will. Yet beneath that grandeur, a darker rhythm pulses, one the chroniclers cannot repress. Every act of order is a wager with chaos, every triumphant decree an invitation for the abyss to answer. The Forbidden Legion embodies that paradox. In their ascent, they strove to master fate. In their corruption, they proved fate's mastery. But it is in their erasure that the most painful lesson is revealed. It is not heresy or defeat that scars most deeply, but silence, the refusal to witness, the willful burial of possibility. The price of remembering is to become responsible for what memory reveals. History across the Imperium has become a mosaic of cauterized wounds. On shrine worlds, priests stand before censored murals, their eyes brimming with holy dread. Among the Navis Nobilite, some navigators weep in trance, tracing lost paths through the void, not toward light, but toward the gravity of forgotten names. To live in the shadow of the forbidden is to inherit a burden not of guilt, but of unfinished reckoning. What does it mean for responsibility to outlive context? What becomes of loyalty when truth is no longer permitted? If the greatest crime is possibility, what future might have flowered if not for fear? On the fortress worlds of Segmentum Solar, instructors teach obedience by omission. There are banners you do not count. There are questions you do not ask. There are sons you do not remember. But repression is its own poison. The Imperium flourishes, then decays, cycling through ages of war, faith, and denial, never healing the oldest wound. The myth of the forbidden persists because the need persists, not for the return of lost heroes, but for the courage to look into the darkness and not look away. The ultimate tragedy is cosmic indifference, that the Emperor did not need to erase his sons for the universe to swallow them. Time alone would have done it. Yet by acting he named loss sacred, ensuring that every generation must feel the pull of the unknown, haunted by a longing it can never satisfy. Your own time, viewers, is not safe from this gravity. Even now, in the Space Marine's war song or the Mechanicus's binary dream, the brute question pulses. Will you accept a world defined by what it forbids, or will you dare to reclaim the silence, to inherit a memory unpromised? In hidden sanctuaries, rogue scribes compose forbidden litanies, blending hopes and fears until the line between history and prayer dissolves. One day, they write, the names will return, and the wound become a door, not to ruin, but to reckoning, not to horror, but to possibility. And we will not be ready. A door once buried is not destroyed. It is only awaiting the dreamer with the strength to open it. Philosophers of the Schola Progenium debate, quietly, furtively, what the forbidden truly represent. Not failure,
Not simply the shadow, but a world where the cost of ignorance is stagnation, and the reward for courage is exile. Look into the Senate of the High Lords, where every decision is buffered by tradition. Each law, each litany, bears an invisible weight, the knowledge that once 2 sons were erased not for their fall, but for what their existence threatened to reveal. Can an empire built on forgetting survive its own future? Or will memory prove the sharper blade, the one that splits darkness from dawn? The blackest secret is that the warp listens. It remembers. Demons gather at the psychic scars of the Forbidden's passing, whispering to each other not of victory, nor vengeance, but of hunger. The living fear, but the forgotten starve. In the deepest vaults, where the Emperor's face is only a shadow cast against gold and blood, an old custodian carves a circle on stone, his hands trembling not from age, but from knowledge. He knows, as do you now, that history never deletes, it only delays. Every silence, paid for with suffering, will one day demand its due. This is the Imperium's final paradox. To endure is to forget. To be immortal is to grieve. To be powerful is to be as fragile as the memory of a vanished name. If you would escape exile, remember what was exiled first. Now the darkness is nearly total, but in the last frame a single point of ember light flickers, not in terror's catacombs, but behind the eyes of every soul who wonders, who were they? Why were they erased? What might have changed if fear were not sovereign? That ember is all that remains of the Forbidden Legion. It is not glory, nor is it shame. It is the persistence of the question, the refusal of the legend to end in silence. So let the story be a warning and a summons. If the echoes of this story stirred you, even with dread, sorrow, awe, or anger, remember, every legend hides a warning. Subscribe and listen for the next one. It may be your echo that answers back.